Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for what I know will be an informative evening. The title for tonight's presentation is College Right for My Child? And I could make you one promise that I'm not going to be able to answer that question for you tonight. And the reason for that is because, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the reason for that is because, you know, each one of your children is so unique, and that's an individualized discussion that you would need to have. But what we do hope to accomplish tonight is to explore different things that you should be thinking about as a parent, as your child's getting ready to go to college, and to think a little bit about some of the things that that will help him or her prepare best for success there. There are many things that are different between their experience, your experience as a parent, and certainly their experience as a student between high school and college. There are rights that they will have. There are accommodations that are different, and of course, many of you who are joining us are parents of children likely anywhere between 9th and 12th grade. And for those of you who are parents of 9th graders, for sure, I can promise you that your child will be different in 3 or 4 years, and so it's helpful, even for if you're that far away from the goal line, to be able to think about some of these issues, to project, to try to put into place strategies for your children, even a few years earlier, to set them up for success in college. I'm joined tonight by Courtney Butler. Courtney is the former program coordinator of the Rutgers College Support Program. I've had the pleasure of getting to know her a little bit over the past few months in preparation for tonight's presentation. She is chock full of information and has a lot of passion. And hopefully, conversation between the two of us will be one that you will all be able to gain from, get information from. And of course, if there are questions that you have, please use the Q&A feature on the bottom of the screen. We will make time at the end of the presentation to try to get to as many questions as possible. And I'm really looking forward to a fun evening together. So Courtney, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'll give a little bit of context as to why I was asked to join this discussion. As Rabbi mentioned, as of the past few months, I'm now the previous program coordinator of the Rutgers College Support Program for students on the autism spectrum. And although my program only supported students with ASD, a lot of students applied that didn't have a diagnosis, that had other diagnoses. We had a lot of people asking about our supports that didn't have, that weren't qualified for our program. And so we did our best to support parents as they inquired about college, because we realized that this is a big transition for the students, but sometimes it's an even bigger transition for the parents to handle. That's why we're having this conversation. We had families of current students reaching out, but more commonly, we had parents of high school students reaching out, trying to figure out if college would be possible for their child. So we had parents of freshmen all the way up until their junior and senior year in high school were calling us, trying to run by scenarios of what their child does, how they're doing in school, and how they act at home, trying to figure out, is college an option for my child? And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation again, but with you all, with Rabbi, and yeah, I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
Amazing. So let's jump right into it. I think most basically, parents oftentimes are curious about what skills their child will need to be successful in college. And when we talk about skills, of course, it's not only academic, so that's part of it, but just, all that it takes to be successful in a college experience. So, based on, your experience working with families and students, Courtney, what would you say are the top few skills that parents should be thinking about and get their kids ready for college?
Sure. So as you mentioned, academic ability is the first thing that you kind of think of. And so I'll start there. So this is the intellectual standing of a student. It's impacted by a lot of different things. But at this point, as a parent, you probably have a pretty good idea of your child's academic ability. You know what their test scores look like. You know what their GPA is. You know what their ability to get work done looks like. And so this is a huge factor in determining options for schools. And so if we're thinking about GPA, some colleges only accept students with a certain grade point average. And that helps to make the decision a bit easier what college you want to go to. But I encourage you to think about the broader idea of college and which one might be the best fit for your child, not just based on the GPA that they have. And so they might get into the best school based on their academic ability, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be successful there. There might be schools with better support options or more mental health resources or better sports teams, whatever it is that is also important to you all and your child's success at college. And so, of course, academic ability is something to really think about, but it can be compounded by a bunch of other factors. And so academic ability also includes things like executive functioning skills. When we're thinking about executive functioning skills, we're talking about the ability to focus. We're talking about organization. We're talking about time management. All of these different things that kind of encompass what executive functioning skills looks like. And so you should really be thinking to yourself and asking yourself when we're talking about the ability to focus. Can they sit in a library for hours on end getting work done? Most students probably can't do this, but there's always the possibility that they can work up to this. And so I'm assuming that you all as parents, most of your children are doing their homework at home with you all making sure that they get it done. And maybe not, but I know that that's typically what's happening. And that's okay for now. But do think about this when your child is starting to think about college, and think about the ability of your child to focus on homework assignments or study for tests for hours on end without you bothering them at the kitchen table, making them do it. It's important to think about when deciding on college options and starting to think about the supports that schools might have to offer. Because again, your child might not have the ability to focus for hours on end, but that's something that they're going to need to have to do. Another part of executive functioning is organization, which I mentioned. And so you should really be thinking about, are they able to organize themselves? Are they able to organize their workload? Do they have a place to store all of their homeworks or paper? Do they have folders or an organization system or even binders in a backpack that they bring to and from school? I know this is typical, but in college, we need to make sure that you're not telling them to put their backpack on their backs and walk out the door, that they know to do that, that they have all the folders that they need in their backpack ready to go, that on their computer, they have folders ready with all of their classes organized. And so these are some things to start really thinking about when you're deciding on school options. And obviously you can work on that at home, but when we think about organization generally, we really want to think about your child's ability to organize all of their things essentially. And with organization also comes organization of time. And so this is kind of that third arm of executive functioning, is we're thinking about time management. And so these are all the skills that are needed to make sure that they can enjoy college. And so what I'll ask you is, does your child have the ability to organize what they have upcoming? Do they know what assignments they have, what exams they have? Is this something that you're sitting at the kitchen table with them and saying, do you know what homework you have coming up on Friday? Because I do, I saw it in your homework assignment log, but maybe they don't know. And so these, again, are really things to start thinking of, is do they know what's coming up, or are you the ones that are telling them what's coming up?
Yes, Courtney, I'm just going to interrupt for
Yeah.
1 moment. I just want to state something I think that is obvious, but it's worth mentioning at this point, that all of these skills that we're talking about, and that please God will continue to mention, they're spectrums, right? And it's not like it's either checked or it's not. I either have the ability to focus or not. I'm organized or I'm not. There's we've seen, if we remember in ourselves, and certainly we see in our children, that there can be growth in these areas. And so if the answer to this question is your child is in 11th grade and he's not quite able to focus, but he's organized. So we're not saying, well, if he's not able to focus, don't send him to college. These are just parameters, things to think about, issues to struggle with a little bit when you're thinking about what would be best how to best set up your kids for college.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all of the things that I think we're going to be talking about tonight you'll get a lot of suggestions of things to look at, recommendations of things to really start working on. It might be scary to think about, but yeah, it doesn't need to be black and white. It doesn't need to be a binary. Can they do this or can they not do this? But I think it's more things to really start thinking about to prepare for college. And if your child is really having difficulties with some of these areas, that might be the determining factor of saying maybe college is not, we're not there just yet, and maybe we will get there. As you mentioned right in the beginning, where a child is at 9th grade is very different from where they'll be in the 12th grade. Where they'll be in their freshman year of college is going to be very different from their senior year of college. And so it is this spectrum, it's this learning curve that comes with education. But yes, these are all things to kind of consider. And I think with that, kind of going into things that we really need to think about with college is, if they don't have these skills, are they willing to ask for help? And are they willing to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to organize my academics. Do you think that they're actually going to be doing those things? Because most students don't. Most students are told what to do. This is really common for high school students, but then they go into college and they think that somebody's going to tell them what to do. And that's really not the case. And so what we want to really start considering, what I suggest that you all as parents really start considering, is, are they actually going to ask for help when they need help? If your child is dead set on being independent and trying to figure things out themselves, that's wonderful. We want to see autonomy. But college is this new league. And if they want to be successful, asking for help is going to be super important. And so when you are thinking about colleges as an option, I think you need to think about the maturity of your son or daughter, think about all of these things that we're going to be talking about. But I think one of the most important things that I think we'll talk about a lot tonight is their willingness to ask for help when it's needed.
And it might be true about some of the other things that we'll be talking about tonight, but when I think about a willingness to ask for help, I think that's an area actually that parents can model for their children, that it's actually a very adult-like thing to do, to ask for help when you need help. And if the children in our homes see the adults ask for help, either of the other adults or the children in the house when they need something, I don't mean something as simple as picking something up from the floor, but struggling with a problem or asking, how would you deal with this? I don't know I have this problem at work and I'm struggling a little bit. It's okay with, children who are in 10th, 11th grade to kind of have those conversations with. It kind of normalizes the fact that, not everybody always has the answers, and it's okay to talk it through with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's a conversation that needs to start happening now, if it's not already. Because I think what we see a lot of is students are not asking for help. And then what happens is they get to college and maybe they're not willing to ask for help. But then we start seeing these issues arise that are of kind of greater concern. And so a big conversation to have is the mental health concern. This is a consideration to talk about with when you're thinking about college in general. This can be the most important thing that you really need to worry about if there is a concern. If your child is not healthy and happy with where they are in school, then school doesn't matter. And this goes back to that asking for help and knowing when to ask for help. So you as a parent should really check in with them. You know them best, and hopefully we'll be able to tell if they're doing well or not. But again, sometimes if they're not willing to ask for help, you need to start thinking of those things. And so be careful about the amount of pressure you're putting on them, and do what you can to make sure that they're honest with you and having open conversations with you. We see parents that are putting way too much pressure on their children. They come to us crying and the parents have no idea. And so it's a good idea to start having those conversations and make sure that if your son or daughter, if they need help, that they feel comfortable coming to you, and if it's not you, going to somebody else and asking for help. I always tell parents that I think everybody should have a therapist. I think everybody should have somebody to talk to, because I don't love going to mom and dad when I'm in college. I don't want to talk to them about how somebody wasn't nice to me, or I got a failing grade, or whatever it might be, because mom and dad don't understand, because I'm an independent adult now. And so it's a good option to have somebody else for them to talk to. And if you establish that early on, I think that's a really good proactive tool for your son or daughter going into college, because if they don't come talking to you, at least they can go talking to somebody else. And if there's that crisis that happens, at least you'll know about it. That's the most important thing, is that they're safe.
You know, Courtney, some of the things that we've been talking about are the academic things, the executive functioning, even the asking for help are things that are internal and are skills that we can teach our students and our children to be able to grow in. But there's the whole other factor of probably what most of our kids think of when they think of college, is the whole social aspect. And it's exciting to finally kind of not live at home, and or even if you are living at home, but to experience a whole new exciting world out there. But I imagine that's an area where some students struggle as well. So maybe we can share a little bit with our participants about some of the things that they could consider about the social readiness of their kids for college.
Yeah. And so the social aspect of college is, I think, the best part of college. Obviously you're there for academics, but you're learning so much more. You're learning interpersonal skills, interpersonal professional skills that are going to carry into the workforce. There's so many things about college that is this great kind of learning experience that's built in. And so college is the place where I think that we see students make lifelong friends, which is a nice built-in thing as well. We know that high school is a place where students are still able to pick their friends, but it's from this isolated population of people that live in the same area. But college is not. It's a place for exploration of friendship and the ability to choose the people that you really want to be friends with, because you have thousands and thousands of them that you can choose from kind of all over the world. And so that's a really cool thing. And so students are finally getting this experience to pick the people that have these commonalities between them and can develop really lifelong friends. The first one that we see is a roommate. This is probably the first friend that they'll make at college if they have a roommate. It's not going to be the only one, but it's likely going to be the first if they do decide on a roommate. If they don't feel comfortable with a roommate, a single room is definitely an option. I highly recommend that students get roommates for the social experience. It doesn't have to be in the first year, but I think that it should happen at some point or another. Living with somebody is a really good skill to have. And so when you're thinking about college as an option, it's important to determine if having a roommate is something that you want your child to consider. If they've ever lived with a sibling before, have they ever gone away to sleepaway camp? Have they ever had a roommate in the past? Those are all things to kind of start thinking about, especially when they're getting into that roommate phase, because having a roommate, if you've never had one ever, can be kind of a big deal. And then other than the roommate, you're going to start seeing some other social integrations into like classroom settings. And so we think about group projects. These will be good people to practice social skills with and easy to connect with because there's this common goal in mind. Group projects are always easy because you don't really have to think of a topic to talk about. You just talk about the project. And what I think is important about group projects is that they're not really avoidable. And so it's good to think now how your child is going to do in that kind of social setting and educational environment. Are they able to work well with others? Because this is something that, again, I don't think that they're going to be able to avoid. And this can be a really good determining factor when thinking about a big versus small school. Larger schools with lecture halls are less likely to have group projects, but again, they're probably going to be unavoidable in some of those upper level classes. And so maybe they can avoid them for a few years, but definitely not forever.
Courtney, one of the things I was thinking about when we're talking about roommates is for many of the parents participating tonight, they may be thinking like my child might be able to handle the academics, but having a roommate or living away from home in terms of all the other aspects that it'll take to be successful to do that is not something that I can see my child doing. Like I hope it, but realistically right now, it's not where they are. And so I guess my question to you is that, how important do you see it is that when kids do go to college, that they actually live away from home? And even for those who don't live away from home, have you seen them successfully maybe transition where, as freshman or sophomore year, they may be living at home and then then transition to living in a dorm a little bit later.
Yeah. So if this is a concern for you as a parent, that my son or daughter has never lived away from home, they have no idea what a roommate even is. They don't have brothers and sisters, maybe. They've never shared a room. I say start getting that experience as soon as possible. Sleepaway camps are an incredible option. I always recommend it to parents when they're asking about what should we do to prepare for college. I say, go to sleepaway camp, get away from parents, because college is essentially a very extended sleepaway camp. If they've never had a roommate before, that's okay. If you feel like a transitionary period is necessary, that's totally fine. We see that a lot of students might live at home for the first year and just get adjusted to academics, and then they'll live on campus and have a single, and then maybe they'll see that they're making friends through extracurricular activities, and then eventually live on campus with a roommate. I think that living with a roommate is a really good skill to have. And I do highly encourage it. Some students go all 4+ years without having a roommate, but I would recommend it. And I think that a transition, especially if you're nervous about it, is a really good option.
When we talk about the social skills that we have in our last few moments, we've been focusing a lot on the social skills in terms of interaction with peers, and managing what it means to be a roommate and so on and so forth. The truth is that this will be the first time that the college students will also be responsible on their own to manage relationships with the adults in their lives, with their professors, with advisors, with other people on campus. And sometimes in high school, even though they have relationships with their teachers, parents somehow also have a weight on that scale as well, and they can call and ask questions and try to intervene if there's a problem. But we know that that doesn't happen in college. So what would you suggest our parents think about when trying to ready their children for managing those adult relationships?
So the adult relationships is always a fun one. This is something that most college students usually have trouble with, at least in the first year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe all 4 years or more. But it's something that most college students have trouble with at some point or another. Most adults in their lives at this point are either teachers in high school that they're probably comfortable with, or their family members or neighbors that, again, they're more comfortable with and they're casual with. Every adult that they interact with at college should be treated with respect and professionalism. And so I always tell students that they should address professors as Mr. and Mrs. And one of the most common pieces of advice that I always try to give students is that they should treat adults as if they need something from them. And so I always tell parents, think about when your kids want something from you. They are probably on their best behavior in these moments when they want something from you. And so I always tell students to treat all adults on campus as if they need something from them, to treat the professors with the utmost respect. And talking to them in person is one thing. Most students, if they're well prepared and if they've been using the Mr. and Mrs. and excuse me and thank you and all of that, will be fine with college. It's a learning curve, but most of them get there. But with technology nowadays, the electronic version of communication can be really difficult. And so I always like to not only talk about adult interactions in person, but also how to appropriately respond to professors and advisors via email, because that's how a lot of our students are going to be actually interacting with their professors. And so I always say, first and foremost, emails are not text messages. I always tell my students that when addressing a professor, an email should be written properly. And so for you as parents, you should really be thinking, first and foremost, above anything, does your child even have their own email address? We get a lot of students that are coming into college and their parents are emailing us and we say, I don't want to talk to you. If your student is interested in our program, if your student is interested in the university, they need to be emailing us. Of course, the parents are the ones advocating for them, but does your child even have their own email address? Are you still the ones that are controlling their emails and signing up for subscriptions, or are you the ones that are emailing for them?
I'm sitting here so surprised that you even have to ask that question. There are high school students that apply to college who don't have email addresses?
We have everything under the sun that you can think of has happened. most of the time, what we typically see is that parents are the ones emailing us, not the students, which is good for a lot of things. We always tell parents that you need to start letting your student take authority on this because they're the ones that are going to college, not you. But we've had students that don't have email addresses at this point. A lot of them are on Discord and on their online services, and they have emails because of that. But is that email appropriate? I don't want to have somebody emailing me dragonslayer642 at Gmail. I want whatever their name is at gmail.com. That's it. And so not only do they have an email address, but is that email appropriate for college? And making sure if it's not if the email's not appropriate, changing that over and making sure that it is. Once they do have an email address, starting to think about and talk about proper email etiquette is really important. And so they should understand that, again, an email is not a text message. If your child is not able to do the basics when it comes to writing a proper email, this is something to work on now. And this is something really to consider before entering college. Because if your child has a question for admissions, the office isn't going to want to read an email from you. They're going to want to read the email from the student. And they'll want to see an email without the word YOU as the letter U. And so starting to talk about that, have that conversation about how to properly write an email and how to properly type out sentences is something to really, again, have a conversation with your child about before entering into that college phase.
It's amazing when you think about some of the things that we have to teach our children to get ready for college and how things have changed over the last 10, 20 years. Things we wouldn't even have thought about putting on a list. We mentioned before about some of the independence that our students in college have, specifically when it comes to areas that relate to living away from home. So we spoke a little before about managing relationships with peers and specifically with roommates. But I'm sure there are a lot of other skills when we think about independent living that our students should be somewhat proficient in order to be successful. I'm wondering what maybe some of those skills are that you've come across.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite topics and probably the most important thing that parents ask about is how do I prepare them now and how do I know that they're ready to live on their own? And so with all of this, they're probably not, but there's a learning curve to college and they'll get the hang of it. But it's best to prepare them for all of this. And so as we've been talking about is it doesn't need to be this binary, are they ready or are they not? Because most students are not ready. And so if you think of some of these fundamental stages of independent living, they're probably not there just yet. And so it is important to consider this as they're deciding if they're ready for college, as you all as parents are deciding if they're ready for college, with the understanding that they can get there. And so when we're talking about independent living skills, the main one is personal hygiene. And so do they shower without you telling them to? And if so, how often are they showering without you telling them to? Because you don't want your child to be the smelly kid in class or the one with the greasy hair. And so if you're downstairs yelling at them to get in the shower, you might want to think about how they will realistically be in college. Do you need to remind them to do these things? That's probably not a good sign. And so it's a good idea to work on this stuff. But again, as you get closer and closer to school, if you're still having to have those conversations with them about just daily living skills, that's something to consider. Other than hygiene, eating is a big one. Is do they eat well when you're not cooking for them? And so I know it's very typical for children to eat what's made for them or put in front of them. And in college, they'll have food in front of them, but you won't be the ones that are deciding what they eat. And so does your child know what a well-balanced meal looks like? Do they know what carbohydrates versus proteins looks like? Do they know that they need to eat vegetables and fruit on a daily basis? Do they know that that's important? Because they're going to be eating at a dining hall each day with kind of any option they want. And so preparing them now for eating well is super important. And it's good to really think about, do you think they're going to be continually picking pizza and cereal every day, or will they actually pick that option of having a salad? Have you had conversations about what healthy eating looks like? It's good to have conversations. Are you worried about them not eating, or are you worried about them overeating? And so these are things to really think about before sending them off into this vast world of bottomless dining hall foods and eating out options, because that's really what college is. And when students don't have food placed in front of them that they're told to eat, they can go a little bit haywire, and we've seen it. But if you start having these conversations now, it makes college options a lot easier. And aside from all of this, one of the most important things that parents always ask us about, and that we always tell, as we're a support program, we always tell parents from day one, is that we are not going to be going to your child's room. We're not making sure that they're eating. And more importantly, we're not making sure that they are getting up in the morning and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And so I think this is a huge conversation to have when you're determining schools, are they actually going to even get up in the morning to start their day and function independently in society? No one's going to wake them up in the morning and get them to class. No one's knocking on their door at 7 a.m. telling them to shower and get dressed and pack their bag and get out the door for the 8 a.m. class. And so if you're still waking them up in the morning, it's important to stop that now, get them in their routine of doing it on their own. But again, having a conversation about kind of independence and working towards college. It's important to talk about the fact that they should have an alarm that works for them. And if they do, they should be practicing it. You should have a conversation about if mornings are not the best time of day. And high school and college students, morning is never a good time of day. Morning to them is probably like 10 or noon. And that's okay. But having a conversation and finding classes that are in the afternoon, if possible. It's not always going to be possible. So you as parents, it's important for you to think about those sleep habits now before they go off on their own. And if you're really concerned about those sleep habits, starting to think about what's realistic when it comes to school, because it's not always going to be possible to have classes that start at noon. And so again, we want you to really think about what's realistic for your child.
Is one of the things that I think about is that for our kids to be successful, the truth is with anything in life, but college is probably top on the list here, is that motivation is really important. And I think that sometimes our kids grow up in a society or culture where, college is really important, and it's a measure of success, measure of who you are as an adult. And even though, us adults know that may not always be true, kids oftentimes, see it that way. And so I'm my long way of saying, how important is motivation? So if my kid can handle the academics, and my kid, can handle the independent living and so many of the issues that we've discussed this evening, but they're not quite motivated to actually succeed there. Is it the kind of thing that you've seen children kind of just grow into, and that it will come, or maybe not? Maybe they should consider a different path.
Yeah, and so when it comes to motivation, I think that typically it depends. That's really the answer, is that it depends on the person. But I think that exploration is a part of college, and if your child is willing to get out of their comfort zone, that's mostly what we want. Students need to be motivated to figure out what they want to do. And one way to do that is to get them involved in things that are fun, and to get them to enjoy college. And so when it comes to motivation, I think, yes, the answer is really that they need to want to be there, because with these independent living skills, especially what we're talking about is we're not doing those things for them. So they're going to need to be doing those things for themselves. Most of our students, the motivation comes from I have to do this. And so even fundamental things like, if we're going back to independent living, is like doing their laundry. It's like, I literally don't have any clean clothes anymore. I have to do this. Or taking medication is that I need to do this, or my parents are going to take me out because I have this bottle of medication that I haven't taken, and my meds are getting all wacky, and I'm not happy, or I'm too happy, or whatever it might be. And so I think the motivation really comes from, I have to do this. It comes from that potential close to failure that we start seeing the motivation from students because it has to be done. I think an intrinsic motivation for students is those that we see that are very academically inclined and overachievers, and they might be intrinsically motivated. But I think all of this stems from this initial potential failure. And so to answer your question, I guess more briefly, is that motivation can come. It doesn't always for some students. Again, we're having this conversation of, is college an option for my son or daughter? And it might not be. It definitely is not for everyone. But for some, it takes time. And sometimes it takes some of these hurdles to fail and realize that I have no food, or I have no clothes, or I have nothing left, and I need to do these things. It really depends on the person. And so that's why I think, again, we're having these conversations of how can you figure out what supports they need and where to look and who to ask and what should I be looking for to prepare them for these things.
You know, we've all seen those statistics or funny memes that you'll see of, like, you know, famous people, actors or other, you know, pop icons who are really successful, who are billionaires and who never went to college, right? Or never went to high school. And then, you know, we say to ourselves, yeah, but, you know, that's 1 in a million. And, you know, is it really true? Everybody really kind of does need to go to college. And I just want to, I guess, challenge that for a moment. You know, now that the world is different now than it was 20 years ago, and there are really legitimate careers that can make solid earnings where you don't actually have to go to college. And so, you know, while college is good for preparation for career and for preparation for life, like in many of the topics we spoke about tonight, it might not be the right path for everybody. And what are the kinds of I guess considerations that parents and children should be discussing, not beyond, you know, do you have the skills to succeed, but like maybe this isn't really something that you need to do or stretch yourself to do, and you'd be more successful if you took a different path.
Yeah, so I think to start is it's good to ask the question, does your child have a career goal? It's not important that they have an idea of what they want to do now, or even in the first year of school, or even in the second year of school. Most schools typically don't request for a major and minor decision until that junior year of school. And if they have even a general idea, they should start taking classes in that area and see if they like it. If they can't handle it, they should think of something else. There are students that have a specific goal, and parents might agree with that goal as well, and that career trajectory. And having a career goal is great, and the parents agree and the student agrees, but does it necessarily require a degree? And so that's really the conversation that we're having, is that not only is college an option, but does it need to be an option? And so there are a lot of career trajectories that don't require a college degree. And what no one ever wants to see is that your child goes to school and it ends up being a waste of your child's time, of your time, and probably a lot of your money to put them through school, even if they don't need to be there, if they really don't want to be there. Yeah. And so what's good to think about with school is, if you have this career idea in mind, you're probably thinking, all right, what's their major going to be and what degree are they going to get? And so you really want to start thinking about, will the requirements for that degree be realistic? Will they be too difficult? Will they be able to handle this? And so it's always really important that you should be realistic about the degree that they're looking at, because say they want to be a doctor, but they definitely don't have the capacity to sit and study for hours on end. They're not willing to do work, or they can't even do basic math. It's just not their suit. It might not be the best degree option for them. And so again, it's important to think about what the requirements are that are necessary for that degree and for that career path, and if it's a realistic option for them based on their academic abilities.
Yeah, I think back to this story. About 15 years ago, I took some of my students to Liberty Science Center, where they have, I don't know if they still have it, but they had something called the cardiac classroom, which was like this small stadium, theater of, I don't know, 50, 100 seats. And it was a live video hookup to Open Heart Surgery Memorial in Morristown Memorial Hospital. And you could interact, not during the whole surgery, but before and at certain points, and certainly after, with all the people in the room. And what was eye-opening to many of our kids is that in the beginning, they went around and they introduced everybody in the room. And I think most of the kids walked in and they thought, like, who's in the room? It's a surgeon and maybe a nurse, you know? But you go walk in there, there are probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 different people in the room. You know, there's the heart-lung technician, there's the anesthesiologist, there's, 3 different kinds of nurses, there's this or that. And so, one of the takeaways for our students was like, I could be really interested in medicine and not go to medical school.
Yep.
Right? And work in a hospital and treat people and work in the field of medicine, but do it in a way that that speaks to me and my skills. And I sometimes wish that all kids would have that experience, in high school where they, can have where their eyes can be open in that way. And I think sometimes, frankly, our parents' eyes need to be open in that way as well. But we have wishes for our kids, or our kids say they aspire to work in medicine. I keep picking on that as an example. And we need to be able to show our kids that you could do that, and there are multiple different paths.
Yeah. And I mean, there are tons of different paths, and what I've experienced over the years that I've been in this field is that a lot of students do get to the point in school where they've spent 4 years trying to get this degree that it doesn't make sense for them because they have this career goal in mind, but college wasn't the way to get there. And so there are definitely other options for college. It might be an option for them and they might be successful in it, but do you really need to go to college to get to the career that you want? And so we talk about, like, trade school is a really good option. Not all careers require a degree, and sometimes trade school and working hands-on can actually be the best avenue for students, especially for those that are not like classroom learners. And this is a really great alternative for students that are not interested in sitting in lecture halls and classrooms for 4+ years, because you can get those jobs. You can get a really good paying job where you're successful and you're happy without having to go through those 4 years if that's not something that you're interested in.
Right. Once parents together with their children decide that college is a realistic goal, we can work towards that. So what are some of the expectations that maybe parents and kids need to prepare themselves for in terms of life at college and how that's different, than life as a student in high school? Not just in terms of the independence that they'll have and the organizational skills that they need and so many things that we spoke, but just in general, like how is life different in college?
Yeah. So the main thing that I think to start talking about with parents is that, one, it's okay to change paths, even if you've started college. This happens all the time for students. They go into college with one expectation of what they want to do, and potentially a few things happen. They realize they don't actually like their major, and they still need to find something else. They realize their degree requirements are too strenuous, and they're not willing to do it, and so they need to find something else. They realize they found something they love even more, and now things have changed, and they've found something else. And so what we don't want to see is that student ends up stuck in this major that they hate and continuing to fail classes, because that doesn't help anyone. And so when we're thinking about expectations, we should talk about what failing looks like, because failing can be a real problem. And so continuing to fail and not do well in school will not only cause low self-esteem, but might cause greater mental health concerns that you might not have even seen before. They might enjoy education and do well if they're if they're taking all difficult courses, they're not going to be successful and everything's going to be more difficult. And so just having those in mind going into it is going to be super helpful. But for the parents, I think the most important thing is that you need to have realistic goals and expectations for your son or daughter. And the most important thing for you all to know is that you're going to have access to basically no information once your child is in college, at least not the information that you want to know about. So you'll have health information, all of that, you're not going to know their grades. That's not even an option, because your child going into college, they're an adults now. And so you won't know their grades, even if they fail. You won't know if they're going to class, and you won't know if they're eating pizza from the dining hall, if they're eating cereal every day. You're not going to know any of that information. You basically just have to trust them on their word with everything. And so independence is a huge conversation that I think it's important to have, that I always have with parents, because they might not be telling you anything. And so you really want to have a conversation of, well, how can I have that conversation? How can I make them have that conversation with me? Is that possible to even have a conversation? And so, well, what can you do? You can threaten them with their lives, which a lot of parents do. Most parents do, which I don't suggest. If they have some kind of support program, there might be an option for a waiver or a consent form to give you as parents information. If your student is not in a program, it might just be a good idea to have some kind of contract or understanding between you and your child, saying something like, I'm only paying for school if you provide access to your grade reports. Like I said, scare tactics are not ideal. Most parents do it. It's just, most parents I know just do this. But I think that providing incentives is a really good alternative, is that we can do a family vacation. If you get A's and B's, I will pay for your gas. If you get A's all this semester, or whatever it might be. But having a conversation about what they're willing to share is going to be the most important thing. And so you need to think as parents, what is my child going to share with me when they go away? And what do I need to be a little bit more concerned about? Because again, will your child even tell you what's going on? And so that goes back to this earlier conversation on the willingness to ask for help when needed. Is, will they reach out to you if things are going poorly? Will they tell you if they have no idea what's going on? And do you have access to their emails and their files? And can you keep track of what's going on from your end? I don't suggest that. I don't ever suggest that, but a lot of parents do it. Most of the parents that I've interacted with have access to their students' records, and it's helpful. But again, is this something that you want to be doing long term? Are these things? These are all things to kind of consider when determining if school is an option, and which school might be an option, is how you can get that information.
Yeah, I'm thinking also about how so much of what we're talking about tonight is really a microcosm for life, and the experience in college in terms of the independence and all that it takes to be successful in college are really skills that it takes to be successful in life. And just like in life, sometimes the best growth that we can do is actually through failure and through challenge. I imagine that for some students anyway, that happens as well, where they think they could do it all, and their parents are clueless because, like you just mentioned, they don't have the rights to know. And so maybe at the end of the semester when they fail and their parents kind of say, "So, how'd you do?" and they can't lie, and they say, "Well, I failed this class," it's an opportunity to reflect. Not only is college right for you, but college is right for you, but what can we do that's a little bit different? How can we set you up for success? And it comes with maturity and with time.
Yeah, and I think this is my one piece of advice that parents always hate, but I say let them fail. Failing is a good thing. It's not the end of the world, because one F, you can probably replace it. But more important than anything, it's going to be a great learning experience for them, because most students are going to realize really quickly that college is not all fun and games, and you can't just cruise by and get A's, because you need to actually do work. And so a failed class isn't going to be detrimental, but it will be a good learning experience. Some students fail the class because they think they know what's going on, but they really don't. And so this also opens up that conversation about that willingness to ask for help. So did you know that you were failing? And if they didn't, well, we need to have a conversation about what that looks like, and why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you look for a tutor? Why didn't you talk to your professor? But in the end, it's going to be up to the student to get their work done. If they're not able to put in the work, then college might not